Shem, I'm going to bring it back to you now because I can see you standing on the spot there. We've talked a lot about turnout, orientation, and what we need to do differently. What do you think this election, that's the 2019 elections, what do you think the election will be remembered for? We've referenced 2011 so much and 2015. What's the biggest takeaway from the 2019 elections as a political journalist on the field?
And as of today, because you may change your mind tomorrow.
For now.
Well, it will go into the history books as the third consecutive elections in Nigeria that have been rescheduled. In 2011, on the day of election, it was rescheduled. In 2015, the election was rescheduled because of security reasons for 6 weeks. And now, like a deja vu, election again is being rescheduled for was rescheduled for 1 week. So a lot of issues relating to the implication of that for that election will come, and how much of preparations Ladi and all of the team that we put into this. Some of our colleagues have been sent far away into far-flung areas, and a lot of money spent in preparations. Not only INEC or security agencies that have suffered some of the implications of this shift in the date, but also an organization as large as Channels Television that has a spread across across the continent, the nation, and some parts of the world. So there is going to be an implication financially for an organization like Channels. And of course, we look at what implication this may be onto the average voter also in terms of the turnout. Judy.
But before we quickly get into the implications of the average voter, Ladia talked about what will this be remembered for. And for me, it's the real test of change. That is what this will remind us of. What do I mean by real test of change? INEC has released the PVC numbers, 72.7 million. But the numbers also show that 8 out of 10 people that have PVCs today were the same people that had PVCs in 2015. So by the real test of change, those that are really going to determine the election this time around are those that determined the election 4 years ago. So the real test will be how easy is it for Nigerians to change their mind.
And again, there's going to be a big question on the implication of having the voter card. So you have your ATM card with you, does not amount that you have money in your pocket. There are a lot of people who have their ATM card, but they never get to use it. So it's turning out to be either those who have their PVC never get to use it, because by the time we are able to get the data on the voter turnout, it will give us a big lesson on how many of the 72 million Nigerians whom INEC says have their permanent voter card are really using it or are using it in 2019.
So the good thing is, Sean, we already have the percentages of the voter turnout. We already have 9 state results and the FCT. But if you look carefully at the results, you find out that only in 2 states was voter turnout above 50%. Ekiti State and Osun State. The other states, voter turnout was below 50%. Now, what do I mean by voter turnout? Let's look at the total number of votes cast relative to those that collected their PVCs. So, and if you look at those results that we have today, only in Ekiti State and in Osun State was voter turnout above 50%. The other states that we've seen right now, voter turnout is below 50%. And even in, let's take one state, Osun State. In 2015, Osun State had the voter turnout of 62%. This time around, even though Osun State has a voter turnout of above 50%, the voter turnout in Osun State, based on the results we have right now, is only 58%. So 62% in 2015, voter turnout in Osun State, 58% in 2019. So we've seen Osun State voter turnout decline. We've seen the other state I'd mentioned right now, Ekiti State as well, another state that has a voter turnout of above 50%. But other state results we've seen, the voter turnout is below 50%. And that really speaks to the legitimacy of who becomes president. Because Thomas Jefferson, the President Thomas Jefferson had said, there's no such thing as a government of a majority. It is a government of the majority who participates. And so today we are most likely going to have whoever becomes the next president, either the incumbent, either the leader of the major opposition party, or the presidential candidate of the other parties. Most likely the results we're going to see today will be based on the minority of eligible Nigerians. And just like it happened in 2015, those that determined who becomes the president of Nigeria, Ladi, are usually based on the minority of Nigerians. Today, the numbers show there are 103 million eligible Nigerians who should participate to vote. What do I mean by 103 eligible Nigerians? 103 million eligible Nigerians. Those are Nigerians that are above
18.
The age of 18. Out of 103 million, 84 million registered. And only 72.7 million pick their PVCs. The numbers we are showing, it is most likely that this election, total voter turnout will be below 35 million.
Good, I was just about to ask you that, because for 2015, I can see 41.54. I was going to say, is it too early for us to estimate a percentage, since people are already talking about how they're disappointed with the turnout from the states we've seen?
Perhaps it's not too early, because we've already seen 9 states, and out of those 9 states, only 2 states have a voter turnout of above 50%. So most likely this trend will most likely continue. And what it really means is that whoever will be president will have been selected from the minority of eligible Nigerians.
Another very critical question, I mean, one of the lessons that this election, or memories that this election will leave, is this is the very first time that Nigeria has gone into an election with the number of political parties. We have 93 political parties going into this election. Perhaps it's a shock for some of you, or some of us who have voted since 1999 up to this time. You perhaps are seeing for a first time, a 3-column list of political parties on the ballot paper. That is a political or electoral shock for an average voter. And then it brings something, it tells us something. What have you been able to discover in terms of the valid vote and the invalid votes?
Well, before we talk about valid votes, I'd like to bring in Yota here. Do you know what it means to print the number of ballot papers for these elections in terms of the cost on forest reserves? You clearly should be able to tell us a bit more. So for the number of the millions of ballot papers we've printed, it means that we have cut down thousands of trees, because we wanted to conduct an election for 73 political parties.
And if I go beyond the ballot paper, because INEC chairman was talking about result sheets, even the forms from E this and E that, A2, beyond the ballot paper, millions of forms.
Beyond even the printing of the ballot papers and all the papers that were printed, look at the amount of vehicles that were deployed. 80,000 vehicles deployed across the country to move materials. 80,000. Do you know the amount of carbon print that carries?
Again, you are assuming that, of course, all these cars were in top condition. As we heard from some of our previous guests.
Not mention the boats. About 900 over 900 boats were also brought in to carry election materials across the country. The carbon print is enormous. And all of this can be cut down. But are we ready?
Well, what we all agree on right here is that the current status quo is not sustainable. We cannot sustain this in 2023 or 2027, neither can we sustain it in 2031. So we need to clearly start thinking about what sort of elections are we going to have in another 12 years. Because based on even life expectancy, now I'm not going to make any prediction, but based on life expectancy, it is unlikely that any of the main political candidates will be here for another 2 decades. So, but we need to still start planning. I don't know if I'll be here for another 2 decades, but we need to start making those plans right now.
Absolutely. And so, talking about plans, perhaps is a good time for us to start thinking about 2023. We might be sitting in this kind of panel in 2023 talking about and covering these kind of election.
And I hope we'll be talking about logistics in 2023.
I hope we are not going to be doing so. But a big lesson, Jide, on the issue of the validity of some votes and how invalid votes that we've seen in this election. Perhaps we might need to start looking into the number, because I saw in some states they have about 17,000 of invalid votes. So it comes down to the fact that voter education goes a long way. It plays a lot of role in the validity of votes, because when a voter does not know how to operate the ballot paper, then it brings a whole lot of problems. So it renders some votes invalid. So at the end of the day, from the issue of voter turnout to the issue of voter participation and the validity of the votes that are cast.
So, Sean, in 2015, we had over 800,000 invalid votes. But there's a new phenomenon happening right now, and that is there's something strange happening. Well, based on the INEC procedures for this election, after you accredit only two things should happen. It's either your vote is valid or your vote becomes invalid. But we now have a situation whereby the total number of invalid votes and valid votes is still lower than the number of those that are credited. In other words, it seems that people were going for accreditation, but not voting. So what we really see, for instance, is you have states where, to make it easy, you have 100 people that were accredited, and if you count the number of valid votes plus the number of invalid votes, it gets to just 80. So the question is, if
what are the rest 20?
We are the remaining 20, and then we hope that the INEC will be able to provide some answers to that gray area, that what really happened, that people were getting accredited, but we're not voting.
But again, another very critical issue is the fact that can Nigerians be able to vote outside, anywhere they are in the country, no matter where you are, if you carry your voter cards? For example, a lot of people who said they traveled to vote at a certain center outside of where they live, and after the elections were postponed, they had to come back to wherever they were living. So could this be also an impediment for participation, and perhaps we might be seeing a drop in the number of participation of voter turnout?
So the major issue shown that we need to consider is, which a lot of people haven't spoken about, and that is, what effect does home ownership have on election?